I do want to have a quick word about the values of inquiry, those things that we're talking about as feedback. And this is in this zone of feedback and evaluation of thinking in the schema. And it comes down to the notion that improvement of anything needs feedback. You have to have feedback. And you might say, well, that's not true. I learned to ride a bike without feedback, but that's not true either, because, whether you were bleeding or not was usually a pretty good indicator of whether you were doing something right. So we get feedback in all sorts of ways. If you were trying to sort of, learn your scales on a keyboard, but it had no sound, you would never improve because you wouldn't hear it. That provides feedback. So what is the feedback we can give students to that? One thing to help us in this process is to take from the American pragmatic philosophers like Dewey and William James and so on, the notion that thinking is inseparable from inquiry. When we're inquiring, we are thinking of the sort we wish to improve educationally. And when we're thinking, we're inquiring. These are inseparable, not identical, but they're inseparable sorts of things. So we can ask ourselves what we value in good inquiry, and that can help us with that answer. And we already have words that we use for that. Words like clarity, precision, breadth, depth, accuracy, relevance, coherence, and significance, and so forth. These are words, as I said, of quality. How clear, how precise, how broad, how significant. And you have already done this as educators. You have already said to someone, you use these as feedback, feeding back on their thinking. You've said your analysis was quite broad, but it wasn't very deep. Or it was quite deep, but you went into an area that, while relevant, wasn't really the most significant one. Okay? Or as a matter of coherence, you said this over here, but this over here, and they don't seem to make sense. As a matter of clarity, can you give me an example of that? So, or matter of precision, can you tell me by how much, rather than just saying a lot? You've used these words yourself, but these are words that can guide our inquiry and stimulate students to be give them more agency in their thinking. And they're also terrific, by the way, for peer evaluation. Can you read this for clarity? I'm not concerned about significance yet, but I want to read it for clarity. Does it make sense? And that way you can kind of get a bit more active in your work. We have I'll just give you a link to this poster here, which we can jump in it's on our Critical Thinking Project website. It's one of many, but we have things like we've got these little clusters. So clarity, accuracy, precision. We have some questions that might be relevant to students. They're just questions I use for my students. They're not the questions. Many educators create their own questions, but they have associated terms such as interpretation, meaning, shared understanding, truth, measurement, correctness, exactitude, care, and so on. If we do the same thing for depth and breadth, relevance and significance, there's a range of questions we can ask their students to get them going or get them to reflect on their own work. And you can see some of those associated terms on the right-hand side there that are very relevant to how we want students to bring their understanding and their content together. This is all situated within the content. And these values are most effective, as I said, when used as feedback on cognition. I mean, here's a nice little play thing we've done before. When we've looked at an analysis and a peer review, we say, can you evaluate the student's analysis in terms of breadth, depth, and significance? Where would you put them on the slider? Now have a conversation about why you think that's the case. And you're directly speaking to their thinking, and you're directly engaging with the content that they're working with as well. Okay, but you're deeply and authentically engaging with it. And I think the values of inquiry are elemental, if you like, atomic to inquiry. So if you have words like discerning, well, what is discerning if not to identify and explain what's relevant and significant? Astute is about accuracy and accuracy of assessment. Detailed or thorough is about breadth and depth and accuracy and so forth. So they are quite elemental terms to use. And they form the basis when we are dealing with uncertainty. They can in fact ground us in our inquiry, because we know these are the questions we need to ask to help move forward with this.